we have the chairman, NSU alum, and 74th District Delegate Lamont Bagby to talk about these important issues. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We want to make sure that all of you are safe on this rainy, cold day here in Hampton Roads and across the Commonwealth. Also, for all of those that experience bad weather across the South, the Southeast, and also our brothers and sisters in the Commonwealth in Northern Virginia and west of Richmond, we hope that you are safe and we're praying for your safety. Also, we'd like to welcome back all of our Spartans for the spring 2022 year. That's right. Many of us are going to finish out your year. Many of us are going to graduate and move on to great things and do phenomenal things like our alum that we have as a guest today. But we want to make sure that you remain safe. That's right, because we have COVID protocol and we understand that we're getting through this and we're going to reach and go over this last COVID hurdle together. So make sure you're keeping yourself safe. Make sure you're wearing your mask. Make sure you're adhering to the vaccination status that we have for the university. And make sure that you're taking care of not only yourself, but you're also are considerate of those around you. In the studio, we also have, always with us, our phenomenal producer, DJ Scandalous, also known as Marvin Folks, here with us. How are you doing today, Marvin?
I'm doing great, sir. Like I said last week, time is just flying. The students are here with their parents. They're loading up into the dorms. It's spring 2022, man. Wow.
I know. Absolutely phenomenal. Listen, time waits for no man or woman, so make sure you grab hold to your dreams and make sure you go forth and do great things. Be outstanding. Listen, today we have a phenomenal show. On yesterday, I was fortunate enough to be in Richmond to see the inauguration of our new governor, new lieutenant governor, and also new attorney general. And also, there were so many other things taking place, and there are 11 executive orders that were signed on day one of our new governor. We're going to talk about those executive orders in depth in the second half of the show. But in the first half, we have with us a phenomenal friend of the university, phenomenal friend of Stay the Water, phenomenal friend of all that is Spartan Nation, our very own NSU alum, who's also chairman of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus and delegate of the 74th Virginia House District, Lamont Bagby. Delegate Bagby, how are you doing today?
All's well, man. Good to be with you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. And also, happy MLK Day that's coming up on tomorrow, where we recognize his life, and honor his life. Of course, his birthday was yesterday, and it's a day of service, Just in a quick reflection, what does MLK Day mean for you?
MLK Day means a great deal to me, but it also is a reminder that they want to control our history. And for many years, all I was taught was I have a dream. It didn't get down into what the real fight was and why they wanted him dead. And so as we approach these conversations here in the Commonwealth, I'm reminded of why he lived and how they have to try to change his legacy from the fight that he lived for into making him somewhat of a Santa Claus figure.
Absolutely. Many times we talked about how our history was just told from one perspective. And I know that our last governor made an effort with a commission to include all of history. I know African-American history itself has been included as an elective at K through 12, in high schools. And also there's been a inclusion of more of African-American history, or what I call the complete story. I hate to call it African-American history, but it's the complete story of American history. But like you said, we have those that want to turn back the clock on that.
Yeah, and it's sad because they coat it with chocolate and call it Raisinets, but we know what it is. And so when we look at just this whole initiative where they have manufactured false narratives as it relates to what we're teaching in our schools, it's beyond sad. It's dangerous. And what we need to be looking at right now is the fact that we have a number of pieces of legislation from Republicans in the House and the Senate that want to block the teaching of our history in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And it was disappointing to hear Governor Youngkin mention that he wants to see and support the history of the Commonwealth being taught fully, good and bad, but at the same time, he and his fellow Republican legislators are pushing an agenda. And so, that is unfortunate because it's a game that they're playing, and it's not just an agenda, it's an all-out war on black history in the Commonwealth of Virginia right now. And folks aren't woke about it because they keep hearing the rhetoric from the podium that says, we want to teach you full history, we want to teach you the good and bad, but at the same time, we don't legislate from the podium on the steps of the Capitol. We legislate inside with legislation, and that legislation is what I hope individuals will pay attention to and not give him a pass because he seems like a nice guy.
Right. I was there yesterday, and I heard the speech, and you're right. He said he wanted to teach. He wanted us to teach all of Virginia's history, the good and the bad. But immediately after the inauguration and with the signing of the executive orders, one of the executive orders was Executive Order number 1, as a matter of fact. It's in there. He signed 11. But number 1, it said it delivers on day one promise to restore excellence in education by ending the use of divisive concepts, including critical race theory in public education. Again, the rhetoric, but then the policy. What is the response of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus to a lot of these issues, are legislation, or proposed legislation that is looking to turn back the clock on a lot of the advances of the Democratic legislature, both in the executive office for 2 consecutive gubernatorial terms, and also in the House and the Senate?
Yeah, so I'm proud of the work that the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus has done over the last couple of years. I'm proud of the Senate and what they will do to block the bad legislation coming out of the House from Governor Youngkin. But you know what? I'm also proud of the fact that the Republicans saw fit to take some of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus members off respective committees. That tells me they have fear that we know how to make the argument for our people, that we know how to call them out, and we have the knowledge and power to make that happen. And so, for example, we have this critical race theory argument, but that's not the real argument. The real argument is black history being taught in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Fair, honest history, uncut. And the black girl deserves to see it and hear it. The white boy deserves to hear it and see the full history. All right? So they can understand where we came from and how we got to where we are, and have a greater appreciation when they visit the Capitol that slaves built. And then you have me off the education committee where I'm not able to argue in committee those points. Marcia Price, who has led the way on voting rights and was the author alongside Jennifer McClellan as relates to the voter Bill of Rights here in the Commonwealth of Virginia that we just passed. was taken off of privileges and elections, unable to make that argument in the committee. Don Scott, who has led the fight on justice reform, was taken off of Courts of Justice criminal subcommittee. Mm-hmm. This is not just by accident. This is targeted. The Republicans are smart. They have an agenda, but they also have a marketing plan.
Right.
And the marketing plan is to make it seem as though they're coming from a good place. But what they really want to do is make sure that they control what's taught as it relates to our history. And that's why, even yesterday, as I heard Glenn Youngkin mention MLK, I cringed. Because those three things, justice reform, quality education, mm-hmm. voting rights, alongside with fair wages, were at the top of Dr. King's list. So don't tell me that you're here to celebrate his legacy while trying to erase the work that we've done towards his legacy.
Right. You know, you mentioned that there were many members of the Black Caucus that actually pushed a lot of the efforts to change policy for the better. You know, because when elections are open, when elections are fair, when more people can vote, more citizens can get involved, it's good for democracy, it's good for Virginia, it's good for the country. You know, but you mentioned that a lot of those individuals were taken off of these committees, not able to speak out. In this last election, Delegate Bagby, you know, the Black Caucus took some hits. There were some members that were lost. Talk about the impact that you think that would have upon the efforts of the Black Caucus agenda.
Yeah, so we lost quite a few members. We lost members in one rural member in Roslyn Dance, and we lost a couple of delegates in suburban areas. In Josh Cole, LaSharice Aird, and
Alex Askew down here.
Alex Askew.
In Virginia Beach.
And with that, I had to remind individuals that fully understand redistricting that we were running on gerrymandered maps that the Republicans drew back in 2011. And so we actually overachieved because the Republicans drew those maps back in 2011 for 67 seats. Mm-hmm. And they started off with 67-33. When I came into the legislature, that we were at 33 seats, Democrats, 67 Republicans. Those lines remain true all the way through this last election. And so the fact that we were able to get 55 seats last time and 48 seats this time is actually overachievement. Because what they do is they packed all of the black folk in respective districts. Right. For example, I won my election with 73% of the vote. And to be frank with you, I didn't spend a dime on my election. I worked hard to help other individuals across the Commonwealth get elected, but I didn't spend a dime on my actual election. But I still won with 73% of the vote. That's not healthy for the Commonwealth. And that's not fair to blacks across the Commonwealth to pack us into districts that we don't have to compete in. And so folks that say, oh, well, you're well off. What are you worried about it? Because that means that some of the individuals in my district could have went elsewhere as it relates to making their voice heard. Right. But they packed us all in. And it happens all across the Commonwealth.
You know, you mentioned gerrymandering, redrawing the lines, and it brings me back to what took place last year, right? So in 2020, of course, the voters went to the polls and agreed for a constitutional law, amendment that basically makes the way that we draw our lines.
Yeah.
Based on the commission. So it's taken out of your hands, the legislator hands. It's in a public commission, right? Now, we can get into that. I've already dealt with that and whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. But for the most part, the Supreme Court approved a recommendation and a plan, and that's what we have.
Yeah.
What is your...
And that's what we are. I mean, the reality of it is, though, is had we not went with the amendment. Well, let me start with this.
Uh-huh.
The interesting thing is, for decades, we have been under this practice of drawing lines.
Right.
Right?
Right.
For a long time, Republicans have had the opportunity to draw the maps in the way that they wanted. Mm-hmm. Never in the Commonwealth of Virginia have black legislators been engaged in the process like they would have been in 2021. It's funny that when the Republicans see that even after gerrymandering maps doesn't save them, that they can't hold on to the power that they have wielded over us. Not until then do they want to change the process.
Right.
And so after all these years, they have controlled the process and been fine with the process and the practices. But then when the black folks get a hold of some power, then there's a problem and we need to change it. And so that in itself should have had bells and alarms going off for individuals not to support this amendment. There's a way to stop gerrymandering. This amendment did not do that.
Absolutely. You listen to Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, here on the new sound of Hot 91, the Solar VA, on the campus of the Norfolk State University. Today we have... Behold, the green and gold. Today we have with us our very own NSU alum, chairman of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, and delegate for the 74th House District with us, Lamont Bagby, to talk about the new governor, the new administration, day one of executive orders. We're going to get more into depth of the 11 executive orders that were signed in the second half hour. But we're talking with Delegate Bagby now about the impact of the proposed bills to help turn back what has happened the last 4 years, the last 8 years, as it relates to equity and equality here in the Commonwealth. Delegate Bagby, when we take a look at those maps and what's been proposed, the question that everybody wants to know, well, not just proposed but approved, are you going to have to run again in 2022?
I sure hope so. As I stated before, I was disappointed with the way that the campaigns were run. There was not enough focus on the actual issues. And not only in the next campaign, but right here, right now in this 2022 legislation session, we are going to be focused and make sure that we don't lose an opportunity to put the issues in the forefront. Take the rhetoric out of the discussion and focus totally on what the actual legislation says and how that impacts the lives of people across the Commonwealth. And so I'm excited for an opportunity to run in 2022. Not sure if it will happen, but I sure hope it happens. And when we get that opportunity, we're going to be focused on not what they said, but what they did.
So in looking at political strategy, because, I believe, and you know it very well, the devil's in the details. It's all about, we got politics, which is basically, who can run the best campaign. But where true change happens is in the policy. So with this legislative session, let's just say some of those bills actually pass. Now, if you run again, well, you have to run again in 2022, that the House can possibly flip. And we could have another Democratic House and also a Democratic Senate. Is that the hope of the caucus and also the Democratic caucus?
Oh, that's the hope, the prayer, the fingers crossed, and anything else that would bring it about. I tell you, if and we can't be just focused on what they're able to pass, because the Senate is going to do a good job of blocking the mess that comes out of the House. We have to be concerned about what the agenda that they propose. And so we got to look at the legislation from the House and the Senate that actually, from the House and Senate Republicans that actually is proposed, because that will tell you what they will do if they have the majority in both the House and the Senate. We were the same way in 2018. You could look at our legislation to see how we would govern if we had the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion. And you saw that what happened. We had the voting rights. We had more access to health care. We did a great deal with justice reform. We supported our HBCUs greater than they've ever been supported before.
Absolutely.
We did a lot with pre-K through 12 as it relates to funding. And we were prepared to, and still left money in the tank for the next administration and our legislators to work alongside each other to give teachers a significant pay raise, getting them above and beyond the average salary across the nation. And so when you look at the work that we were able to complete, that showed in the legislation that we were proposing in 2018. And so the fact that they are looking to roll those things back can't be discounted just because they won't be successful because the Senate will block them. Nor can we look at the governor, Governor Youngkin, passing out candy as it relates to giving rebates. The more rebates we give, the less money goes to schools. The more rebates we give, the less money goes to roads. The more rebates we give, the less money that goes to our HBCUs. So, do we want to pay the bills, or do we want to send money to folks so they can go to Applebee's?
You know, when you phrase it that way, when you package it that way, you know, $600 in your pocket means times X amount of millions of citizens in the Commonwealth means where do we get the money to actually fund programs, fund education, and fund things that we need in order to, so that you can have not just $600 one time, but $600 extra per week.
Yeah,
you know. So
and as we were the majority in both houses and had the keys to the mansion, we paid the bills. We did more for teachers. We did more for K-12 education. We did more for access to health care in the midst of a pandemic. We built more roads. We have, this is something that the rural folks don't want to talk about as much. We made sure that we got broadband across the Commonwealth, and that's the help of a gentleman in D.C. and the Democratic majority in D.C. Joe Biden. They helped us with the funding to make sure that all these things were taken care of, even with the business community and the PPP loans.
Yeah.
We didn't do a great job in this last election of showing how we kept things afloat, even in the midst of a pandemic.
Absolutely. You know, Delegate Bagby, there's one other issue I want to really get your take on, and it's that argument of school choice, right? It's finally crept into Virginia and it's crept into our legislature. And it took a while because Virginia does have one of the best public school systems in the entire country. You know, our education is, you know, it rivals many, many other states. Now, of course, we have some issues in certain counties and certain parts of certain cities, but overall, I mean, we've got great public education. You know, many of us are products of public education, my children, myself, and others. But the argument for school choice, and I put that in air quotes, I'm air quoting here on air, and it's that argument of vouchers, public dollars going to private institutions, private schools. What is your take on that particular argument and actually that having a chance to gain steam here in the Commonwealth and be effectuated even through charter schools?
Listen, fellow Spartan. I wish I could trust them, but I can't. If they wanted to do something about, and they oftentimes use black faces, not black and brown, black faces, to make their argument as it relates to how they want to support black students. If they wanted to support black students, they would support them where they are, and not just in the classroom where they are, because someone told me something very early on when I was serving on the school board that I didn't like it when I first heard it, but sometimes the truth hurts. And that is, schools are a reflection of the communities that they serve. Yeah. So that makes you dig into some of the school communities and how those communities were put together, and how saturation of poverty impacts so many individuals. It affects their health care. It affects their education. Those primary two, and it also affects their access to transportation. And so, one of the things that we want to do is we not only want to support those families as it relates to the education, the quality of education that they have, but we also want to make sure that we are looking at those underlying racist issues, such as housing, and how we treat the individuals that are living in poverty. And so, as we look at this whole thing about charter schools and vouchers, my question is, you cannot. Well, my charge is, you cannot change the minds of those individuals that have not wanted to do or raise a finger to help those individual schools and communities, and now all of a sudden they want to pick through lottery who will get a quality education. I can't, when it's time to feed my children and it's dinner time, I don't just pick one of them to eat. All of them have to eat.
That's right.
I wish I would try say, hey, look, we're gonna put all three of our names in a hat, and the one name that we pick out, that's who eats tonight. I'll be sleeping on the porch.
Hey, look, when you put it that way, I'm laughing not because it's a funny situation, but because when you
it's
put
so
it
in your face.
Absolutely. When you put it that way, it's like, wow. We have to ensure that all of our children receive the best opportunity for a quality education that they can, because really that's the only way any of us in our country, our community, our state, that's the only way that we're going to really get the benefit and the maximum benefit of who we are as a one Virginia. Absolutely. Yeah. So, we have 1 minute left here, and I want to acknowledge the things that you've been doing as chair of the Black Caucus. You've been chair for a while. My question to us that we want to ask as a Spartan and the Spartan Nation here, will you continue to be chair throughout the 2022 legislative session?
Yeah, I was voted in last month to serve another 2 years.
Absolutely.
So you all are stuck with me another 2 years.
Well, look, that's a good stuck, and I couldn't think of anyone better to serve as chair. And I remember the days when you were a young delegate, when I was working with Senator Locke in her office, and when she served as chair of the caucus. And I'm so very proud of and to see your trajectory and what you've been doing, not just in the legislature. That's really what you've been doing in the community. I mean, that speaks volumes, and we're excited to see you continue to lead.
Yeah, and it's been a true honor to serve behind so many giants that have actually served as chair. Even Gerald Jones, who represents the Norfolk area and then sits on the bench there, and then Mamie, who she and I have tag team on legislation, from getting rid of payday lenders, those vultures in our communities, to bringing about Juneteenth, which again Republicans opposed, but then did not want to face the fire, so they ended up voting for it. But they tried every chance they could to block us celebrating Juneteenth as a state holiday. To just recently, she and I worked on a letter to the Attorney General together, to make sure that he went back before he left office to overrule and change the outcome of some of the racist opinions that came out of the AG's office. Everything from that impacted housing to segregation to to redlining. Right. All those things that the Attorney General's office in the past had issued as it relates to opinion. We were able to make sure that on Attorney General Herring's way out the door, he was able to address that. So it's been an honor and a privilege to not only serve as the VLBC chair, but also to serve alongside some of those giants out there in the Hampton Roads area, serve alongside them.
Absolutely. You've been listening to Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We're going to thank Delegate Bagby, NSU alum and chair of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, for joining us on the first half hour. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hello?
Man, where are you? I thought you were coming.
I can't. I'm in bed with the flu.
The flu? Whoa. Grandma's about to crowd surf. Man, I'll call you back.
Don't get stuck at home with the flu. A flu shot is safe, effective, and you can get it at the same time as your COVID-19 vaccine. A flu shot is the best way to prevent the flu and its potentially serious complications. Don't get flu FOMO. Learn more at getmyflushot.org.
Brought to you by the AMA, CDC, and the Ad Council.
The new sound of Hot 91, the soul of VA, celebrates the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s real first name was Michael. He was named after his father. His father became inspired by the religious thinker Martin Luther and changed his name and his son's name. Dr. King was kicked out of the first grade, but later he ended up skipping 2 grades, and he started college at the age of 15, and he became a Morehouse man. Dr. King received degrees in sociology, divinity, and systematic theology. Dr. King was also awarded at least 20 honorary degrees over his lifetime.
Celebrating the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the new sound of Hot 91, the soul of VA.
Welcome back. It's Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We want to again thank you for joining us on this Sunday here in Hampton Roads, while we're broadcasting live on the campus of Norfolk State University, the new sound of Hot 91, the soul of VA. We also like to, again, welcome back all of our Spartans who are coming back here for their spring 2022 semester, and those seniors who are looking to graduate. Make sure you finish strong. I'd like to also mention that this Monday, MLK Day, here on the campus of Norfolk State University, is the Bob Dandridge MLK Holiday Basketball Challenge that's going to be held here on our campus. It was going to be at Scope Arena, but we have it here on the campus of the Norfolk State University. Bob Dandridge is our alum. He's our all-star superstar, and he is our Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame inductee. So make sure that you come, and you can get your tickets at Ticketmaster or HamptonRoadSports.org. Come and enjoy that. We're going to have quite a few high school basketball teams here competing here on MLK Day, which is also a day of service. So make sure you go out, give, do something in memory of the day in which we recognize his life. Of course, we celebrated Martin Luther King's birthday on yesterday. And on yesterday, we had the inauguration, Marvin, of our 74th governor. And it was a phenomenal event. Of course, the peaceful exchange of power, not just in Washington and our federal government, but here on the state level, is always something to behold. And it's something that's unique to our country because many countries don't have that. They have coups that take place. They have a lot of violence and things of that nature. But we're fortunate enough to agree to disagree on a lot of issues, political issues, policy issues, social issues. But at the end of the day, we believe in our institutions, that our institutions are strong, our institutions work, and our institutions are worth fighting for because once they fail, then we as a nation fail as well. So with that, in the first half hour, we had our very own alum and also chair of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, who's been voted in, Marvin, for the next 2 years. So we're excited to have him lead the charge of the Black Caucus agenda in the legislature in Richmond that will impact not just individuals in that area, but all across the Commonwealth. Lamont Bagby in the first half hour where he talked about the upcoming session, the agenda, and some pieces of legislation that's been proposed in order to impact a lot of the gains of the last Democratic House. So we know that the House now has flipped to Republican, and every year there are proposals, bills out there that are proposed. Some get through subcommittee and get to full committee and go to the floor and are voted on. Some voted up, some voted down, and then some are signed into law by the governor at that particular time. And this time is no different. He talked about a lot of bills that were put up to turn back the clock on a few things, and caucus members that were taken off of those committees that were fighting for a lot of the efforts that really helped to open up the Commonwealth, open up the voting process, open up the political process, the public policy process, and open up education and teaching of history, or what we call the full history, of our community, of our state, of our people. So again, politics is a game of chess, in running, but policy of politics is a game of not just chess, but you have to make sure that you stay locked in. And that's what this is all about. Staying locked in, not just listening to the rhetoric, but listening to what's being proposed to make sure that you are involved and you are part of the solution. So you can learn more about the caucus and the things that they're doing. You can follow Lamont Bagby on his social media, and you can go to VA Black Caucus. It's VABlackCaucus.com. That's VABlackCaucus.com to learn more about what your legislators are doing to impact your policy and your lives across the board. So now in the second half hour, as I mentioned, I want to talk about real policy that has taken place already. Day one, the Governor Glenn Youngkin signed 11 day one executive actions. And these executive actions were promises, campaign promises. They were on his website, so it was really no surprise that this is what he was going to do. So he told you exactly what he was going to do when he became governor, and he effectuated those things here. So we're gonna go through, and I'm gonna let you know what these 11 executive orders are. But I'm also going to go into a few of them, and I want to find out what you think about it. Go to our social media. Give us your opinion. What do you think about these executive orders? How will you believe it'll impact your life, your community, your family? And what do you think our legislators, your legislators, should do about them? Once again, at hot91online.org. Give us your, at WNSB, yes, at WNSB, give us your take on it. So, on yesterday, we had the inauguration of our governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general. I was fortunate enough to be a part up there to view that. And then also the executive orders that were signed that particular day. So he signed 9 executive orders and 2 executive directives. And there's a difference between the two. We'll talk about those in just a moment. He signed those at the Virginia State Capitol, in which he acted on day one promises to Virginians. And this is based on what I'm reading from is a press release from the governor's office. So you can go to governor.va.gov. That's governor.va.gov. And you can look at these executive orders as well. So I'm reading from this press release. The actions include an executive order ending the use of inherently divisive concepts, including critical race theory in public education. An executive order affirming the rights of parents to make decisions on masks in schools. Executive order terminating the Virginia Parole Board and requesting the Attorney General to begin a full investigation of the board's actions. So, quote, it's day one, and we're going to work just like we promised, said Governor Youngkin. And he's right. This was on his website. Quote, the important steps we are taking today begins the work of restoring excellence in education, making our community safer, opening Virginia for business, and reinvigorating job growth and making government work for the people and not the other way around. My day one game plan also includes 59 pieces of legislation and a package of more than a dozen budget amendments I'm working on with the General Assembly leaders, including our efforts to double the standard deduction, eliminate the grocery tax, and end the tax on the first $40,000 in veteran retirement pay. It's a new day in Virginia. but the work is only beginning. So the election is over. The pomp and circumstance of the inauguration is done. And immediately afterwards, this governor got down to business putting in executive orders and directives and 59 pieces of legislation. 59, which part of that 59 are 59 budget amendments. Now, we don't have time to go into those in this show. We'll talk more about those budget amendments throughout the month of January and February. And we will also look at the final packages in March when the legislative session ends March 12th. We'll take a look at the laws that were signed into law and what the final budget is for the Commonwealth. As a state institution, Norfolk State University is also funded by state dollars. So this is very important for us as well, because we have received historic funding in the Northern administration, the gains and the work that's been done on behalf of the legislature, more specifically the Black Caucus, really pushing a lot for HBCUs and others. The support's there. Now, this governor also said that he's supporting HBCUs as well. He said it many times before, speeches. He's written it. He's spoken to our presidents about it. So it's there. And the support of the rhetoric is there, and it's also in policy. So we're going to see how far it goes over the finish line, because as our HBCUs grow and prosper, so do Virginia and Virginians. But let's take a look at these executive orders one by one. And like I said, I'll delve more into a few of them on this second half hour. Executive Order number 1 delivers on day one promise to restore excellence in education by ending the use of divisive concepts, including critical race theory in public education. Executive Order number 2. It empowers Virginia parents in their children's education and upbringing by allowing parents to make decisions on whether their child wears a mask in school. Now, we're going to talk about that. We're going to delve into it, that and critical race theory in public education, because as we deal with teaching all of Virginia's history, the good and the bad, as promised during the governor's speech, and as we deal with this pandemic, these 2 executive orders become extremely important. Extremely important. How fast do we get through this pandemic? Executive Order number 3, restoring integrity and confidence in the Commonwealth Parole Board. Basically, what he's going to do is he's fired everybody on the parole board. All right. So everybody who's on the parole board are done. He's going to replace them with new parole board appointees, and the Attorney General, he's ordering them to investigate the actions of the parole board. Executive Order number 4. Investigate the wrongdoing in Loudoun County. Of course, that was an issue, school board issue, where there was some information that was left out for parents to know and things of that nature, and decisions made. So there's going to be an investigation into that. Also, Governor Youngkin is Executive Order number 5. He is creating the Commonwealth Chief Transportation Officer, the CTO, Chief Transportation Officer. We'll get into more of what that means and how that is going to impact us in Virginia. Because we know here in the Commonwealth, especially Hampton Roads, transportation is key. You got to go through a bridge and a tunnel and a bridge to get anywhere. Executive Order number 6 is declare Virginia open for business. Executive Order number 7, to combat and prevent human trafficking and provide support to survivors, which is very important. Executive Order number 8 promises to establish a commission to combat anti-Semitism. Now, we know in the last really decade, anti-Semitism has been on the rise, along with other hate crimes toward African Americans and the like. So this is very important, because no one should be hated. Nobody should be harmed because of how they were born, their beliefs, the color of their skin, or their gender. Executive Order number 9 orders the Virginia to withdraw from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So now we're talking about climate change. We're talking about the impact of climate change, our actions on the climate. So we'll get into that in just a moment as well. Now, Executive Directive number 1 promises to jumpstart our economy by cutting job-killing regulations by 25%. So this says regulations. When I talk about regulations, I talk about them as being protections. So protectionisms and regulations are used interchangeably by myself on this show because regulations, I believe, are in place in part to protect people, citizens, and the like. Case in point, if there were no regulations were placed in order to stop companies from dumping harmful materials like mercury into our oceans, which is why we have high mercury content in a lot of our seafood. So there were protectionisms put into place in the form of regulations to protect us as consumers of seafood. I consume a lot of seafood from high levels of mercury. So protectionisms, regulations, they will be used interchangeably. You heard me use them interchangeably on the show. I'll continue to do that. So we'll find out what those regulations are, those protectionisms are that are being removed. And also day 2 of Executive Directive promises to restore individual freedom and personal privacy by rescinding the vaccine mandate for all state employees. All right, so Marvin, let's delve into these executive orders and these 2 executive directives. Let's take a look at the first executive order itself, removing public education, the teaching of divisive, as is stated, divisive concepts as called CRT. So it says the directive itself, it says accordingly, pursuant to the authority vested in the chief executive officer, which is the governor, Article 5 of the Constitution, and each directive will read that way, so I'm not going to read that again. But it basically states that the superintendent of public education shall review all policies within the Department of Education to identify those that promote inherently divisive concepts. Such policies shall be ended. So when we talk about law, the words matter, right? Words matter. Words matter, which is why when you say something, make sure you watch the words that you say because they matter. So when you hear something that says shall, must, that means that it has to be done. So the question becomes, what are those policies that will be ended? Also, Superintendent of Public Instruction shall immediately review all guidelines, websites, best practices, and other materials produced by the Department of Education here in Virginia to identify those that promote or endorse divisive or inherently racist concepts. Such shall be removed. Also, he says that executive employees shall be prohibited from directing or otherwise compelling students to personally affirm, adopt, or adhere to inherently divisive concepts. So the question becomes, how do we now define divisive concepts? So in number 6 under the directive, the Superintendent of Public Instruction shall review all changes made by the Commonwealth of Virginia's public education curriculum within the last 48 months. 48 months? That's the last 4 years. Who was governor the last 4 years? To identify inherently divisive concepts, including concepts or ideas related to critical race theory, and initiate through the regular curriculum and reevaluation process, changes that will replace them with concepts and lessons that ensure all Virginia students are taught to respect all individuals regardless of their race, sex, or faith. Also, they're going to review Ed Equity VA program and end any portion that promotes inherently divisive concepts. Also, the public instructions, Superintendent of Public Instruction shall end the Virginia Math Pathways Initiative. The Virginia Math Pathways Initiative. Now, these initiatives, also, The superintendent of public instruction shall review and immediately end the use of any portion of the governor's schools program that inherently promotes divisive concepts. Now, this is for K through 12. This is not, by the way, this does not impact universities. This does not impact universities. This is K through 12, everyone. I want to make sure that all of us understand that. Now, for the purposes of this executive order, inherently divisive concepts means advancing any ideas in violation of Title IV and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, including but not limited to the following concepts: race, skin color, ethnicity, faith. I'm not going to go into all these, but basically it deals with creating, quote unquote, a more inclusive and non-threatening curriculum. So keep in mind that this is going to be a major fight across the board. Last part, number 13, it says that the superintendent of public instruction will initiate through the regular curriculum reevaluation process changes that ensure Virginia students are given thorough and comprehensive education of world, United States, Virginia history without the influence of inherently divisive concepts. So you ask yourself, how can you receive a thorough and comprehensive education of the world without educating people about the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So that within itself is going to be a major fight, because the question that this is going to boil down to, as I mentioned earlier, how do you now define and interpret, quote, inherently divisive concept, unquote, under Title IV and Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act? That's what it boils down to. How do you now interpret that? And how it's interpreted is going to determine what concepts are taken out, what history is stated, and so forth. As Delegate Bagby said, when he grew up, he only knew that Martin Luther King, the good stuff that he promoted, right? But he wasn't taught the bad stuff that happened to him. Out of pain, out of struggle came this beauty. But where did that pain and struggle come from? Did it come from himself? No, it came from others that opposed him. And opposed not just him, but others working toward the goal of equality and also equity. So what are your thoughts about that? Where do you think the fight's just started? But I also, and I've said before, this is going to be a national fight across the board when we start to look at national campaigns, both for U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress, and this is going to be a centerpiece in the 2024 presidential elections. You've heard it here. I've said it before. It's going to be a centerpiece in it. All right. So let's look at Executive Order number 2. And I also want to look at Executive Directive number 2 because they go hand in hand. Executive Order number 2 basically gives parents the ability to choose whether their kids wear masks in schools. So let's take a look at it. The directive says that the state commissioner shall terminate order, public health emergency order number 10. And what does that mean? That says that parents of any child enrolled in elementary or secondary school or a school-based early child care educational program may elect for their children not to be subject to any mask mandate in effect at the child's school or educational program. Number 2, no parent electing that a mask mandate should not apply to his or her child shall be required to provide a reason or make any certification concerning the child's health or education. Here's the key. They don't have to give a reason, a certification of the child's health. So that means if a child has COVID, you don't have to tell them that they actually have it. Number 4, a child whose parent has elected that he or she is not subject to a mask mandate should not be required to wear a mask under any policy implemented by a teacher, school district, Department of Education, or any state authority. And schools should marshal any resource available to improve inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, upgrades, equipment, improve indoor quality facility, including mechanical, non-mechanical heating, and so forth, and the like. In other words, yes, you don't have to wear these masks. You don't have to disclose your reason why. You don't have to disclose a health certification, which means you don't have to disclose whether you have COVID or not. But we do order all schools to improve the circulation of the air, repairs, and so forth for monies. Escalate that. Now, let's take a look at the mask mandate for state employees before we delve into it. Now, this executive directive says that he issues this to ensure the privacy and health of the executive branch employees against COVID-19. This directive says that the Department of Human Management shall work with private providers to ensure that vaccines and boosters are available to state employees, and they can share this information to executive branch. Also, provide KN95 masks. But no executive branch employee shall be required to be vaccinated or required to disclose their vaccination status as a condition of their employment. No documentation identifying your vaccination status will be shared with third parties. Nothing shall be construed as far as a executive branch employee's rights or access to personal health insurance under personal health information under the state. And also, any agency that determines federal requirement applies to any office or programs that is inconsistent with the provisions of this directive shall notify the Secretary, Chief of Staff, in consultation with the Attorney General. Now, this includes Office of the Governor, Office of Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of Commonwealth, executive branch agencies, which also means all the other agencies under it, whether it be Veteran Services and the like. Also, institutions of higher education and authorities established within the executive branch under this particular code. So, as an employee, based upon this executive directive, you, by the governor, and also the executive order by the governor, your children don't have to wear a mask if they don't want to. And as an employee, you don't have to get the vaccine if you don't want to, and you don't have to disclose it. Is this good for Virginia? Is this good for your personal health? Is this good for the pandemic and us getting past it? What do you think? Let us know. WNSBonline.org, at WNSBonline.org. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know what you think about this. And give us your opinion, because this is your Commonwealth. This is your community. This is your health. Now, we didn't have a chance to get into all of the executive orders, but I wanted to make sure that I covered those two, dealing with education and also dealing with the pandemic itself, because we've been through a very hard year, 2 years now, almost 2 years. In March, it'll be 2 years since COVID-19 dropped on our shores and the world. And we're still going to get through this together. So with that being the case, we want you to go and make the decision for yourself. This is your Commonwealth. This is your community. Make your voice heard. That's what it's all about. This is what democracy is all about. This is what the peaceful transfer of power is all about. And this is what elections are all about. Elections have consequences. And the consequences are in the policy that governs your life, your children's life, and everyone else's. The only way we're going to change and create the change that you want to see made is if you get involved and make sure that you make your voice heard. Well, that's all that we have for now on this edition of Save the Water. But guess what? We're here every Sunday live at 1 o'clock. So tune in when we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. Be blessed. We'll see you next Sunday.